In this episode, we move into a topic that sits right at the meeting point between security operations, management judgment, and business communication. New learners sometimes assume metrics are just numbers collected for dashboards, audits, or monthly meetings. But in security management, they are much more than that. Metrics help leaders decide whether risk is rising or falling, whether controls are working as intended, whether resources are being used wisely, and whether the security program is improving in ways that actually matter to the organization. That is why this subject matters so much for anyone learning the management side of security. For someone preparing for Certified Information Security Manager, CISM, evaluating and reporting information security metrics is not about becoming obsessed with charts or spreadsheets. It is about learning how to tell the difference between useful signals and empty noise, then communicating those signals in a way that helps people make better decisions about risk, resilience, priorities, and accountability across the enterprise. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A security metric is a measured piece of information used to understand something about the condition or performance of the security program. That sounds simple, but the simplicity can be misleading because not every number is a useful metric. A number can describe activity without revealing effectiveness, and it can look precise while still failing to answer an important management question. For example, reporting that the security team reviewed thousands of alerts may sound impressive, yet it tells very little by itself about whether important threats were detected promptly, whether false alarms overwhelmed the team, or whether actual risk to the business changed in any meaningful way. This is one of the first lessons beginners need to absorb. Metrics are not valuable just because they can be counted. They become valuable when they help the organization understand what is happening, why it matters, and whether a control, process, or decision is moving security in a stronger or weaker direction over time. That is why evaluating metrics is just as important as collecting them. A security manager should never accept a number at face value simply because it appears official or easy to present. The manager has to ask deeper questions. What exactly is being measured? How is the data gathered? What assumptions sit behind it? And what decision does this metric help support? If those questions cannot be answered clearly, the metric may not deserve a central place in reporting. Beginners often imagine that management means wanting more data, but mature management is often about asking whether the available data is relevant, trustworthy, and connected to risk. A metric that is easy to gather but weakly related to business impact can distract leaders from more important issues. By contrast, a metric that is harder to interpret but tied closely to control performance, exposure, or resilience may deserve greater attention because it helps the organization see reality more clearly. Useful security metrics usually share a few important traits. They should be relevant to organizational goals, meaningful to the audience receiving them, and consistent enough that changes over time can be interpreted with confidence. They should also be timely, because outdated measurements can produce a false sense of assurance or hide a growing problem until the delay itself becomes part of the risk. Just as important, they should be understandable. A metric that only the security team can interpret is not very helpful when leaders outside the function need to oversee risk and allocate resources. This is where many weak reporting practices begin to fail. They focus on technical detail without asking whether the audience can connect the measurement to a business concern. Effective metrics are not necessarily simplistic, but they do need a clear relationship to the question being asked. If leadership wants to know whether the organization is becoming more resilient, then the chosen metrics should help answer that question directly rather than simply proving that the security team stayed busy. One helpful distinction for new learners is the difference between leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator tells you something that has already happened, such as the number of incidents experienced during a quarter or the number of systems found to be non-compliant during a review. These metrics are useful because they show outcomes, consequences, and patterns that can help explain how well the environment has been managed. A leading indicator, on the other hand, points toward conditions that may shape future outcomes, such as delayed risk assessments, overdue access reviews, or a rising backlog of unresolved high-risk weaknesses. In simple terms, lagging indicators tell you where you have been, while leading indicators help you think about where you may be going. Strong security management usually requires both. If an organization looks only at lagging indicators, it may understand problems only after they have already caused harm. If it looks only at leading indicators, it may predict risk without confirming whether past efforts actually improved outcomes in practice. Another major part of evaluation is deciding whether a metric supports business understanding rather than just security understanding. Security teams may naturally care about technical performance, and that is reasonable, but CISM thinking pushes the learner to connect metrics to organizational objectives and business risk. A measure becomes more powerful when leaders can see how it affects continuity, customer trust, legal exposure, operational efficiency, or strategic goals. For example, a trend showing delayed patching on internet-facing systems matters partly because of the technical weakness involved, but it matters even more when connected to the possibility of service interruption, unauthorized access, or regulatory trouble. That business connection helps leaders grasp why the metric deserves attention beyond the technology team. It also helps prevent security reporting from becoming isolated from the rest of management. When metrics are aligned to business concerns, they stop looking like specialty data produced only for the security department and start functioning as management information relevant to the broader enterprise. It is also helpful to understand that metrics exist at different levels. Some are operational and help teams manage daily or weekly work, such as the time it takes to investigate alerts, review access changes, or close high-risk findings. Others are more strategic and help leadership understand whether the overall security program is improving, where major exposures are accumulating, and whether investments are producing better control performance or stronger resilience. Beginners sometimes think a single report should hold every possible metric in the same way for every audience. But that creates confusion because different levels of the organization need different kinds of insight. Operational teams often need detail and immediacy, while senior leadership needs trend clarity, business relevance, and a sense of whether attention or support is required. Good evaluation means recognizing which metrics belong in which conversation. A metric that is perfect for a technical working meeting may be almost useless in a board-level discussion unless its meaning is translated into risk, consequence, and organizational significance. One of the easiest traps in this topic is the use of vanity metrics. A vanity metric is a number that looks impressive or polished, but does not actually help the organization understand its security condition very well. Counting total alerts processed, total scans completed, or total policies published can create the appearance of motion, yet those counts may say little about actual risk reduction or control effectiveness. This matters because people are naturally drawn to numbers that are easy to gather and easy to present. They make reports look active and productive. The problem is that activity is not the same as impact. A team can close large numbers of tickets and still leave major exposures unresolved. A program can train many employees and still fail to change risky behavior. A report can be filled with statistics and still leave leadership unable to answer the basic question of whether security is improving in a meaningful way. Evaluating metrics requires the discipline to challenge good-looking numbers that do not provide useful insight. Context is what prevents metrics from becoming misleading. A raw number by itself often tells only a small part of the story. If incident counts increase, that may suggest rising risk, but it could also reflect improved detection, expanded reporting requirements, or a change in classification methods. If vulnerability numbers fall, that might indicate progress, or it might mean scanning coverage dropped and the organization is simply seeing less of the problem. Without context, even an honest metric can lead to poor conclusions. This is why effective evaluation always asks how the number compares with past periods, what changed in the environment, whether the scope remained consistent, and what other measurements support or challenge the interpretation. Trends are usually more meaningful than isolated points in time because they help the organization see movement rather than snapshots. A single month can mislead for many reasons, but a consistent pattern over time gives leaders a stronger basis for understanding whether a control is stabilizing, whether a risk is growing, or whether a reported improvement is likely to be real. When beginners ask what kinds of metrics matter most, the answer is usually that the most useful ones are tied to known risks, critical processes, and important control areas. An organization may care about how quickly serious weaknesses are addressed, how effectively access is reviewed and corrected, how often key recovery processes succeed, whether critical vendors meet security expectations, or how consistently important incidents are detected and escalated. It may also care about how many high-impact exceptions remain open, whether awareness efforts influence reporting behavior, and whether corrective actions from reviews are completed when promised. The point is not to memorize a universal list, because different organizations will emphasize different concerns based on their business model and risk profile. The deeper lesson is that metrics should emerge from what the organization is trying to protect and where its most meaningful exposures sit. When metrics are built around real priorities, reporting becomes more credible because it reflects the environment the organization actually operates in instead of a generic set of security statistics copied from somewhere else. Data quality has to be taken seriously because weak data leads to weak reporting, and weak reporting leads to poor decisions. A security metric can fail not only because the concept is bad, but also because the underlying information is incomplete, inconsistent, or collected differently by different teams. If one group counts incidents using one standard and another group uses a broader definition, the final report may look precise while actually combining unlike things. If system inventories are incomplete, metrics based on coverage will be misleading. If status updates are entered irregularly, trend analysis may become unstable. This is why evaluating metrics includes evaluating their source. A thoughtful security manager wants to know where the data comes from, how consistently it is maintained, and what limitations should be disclosed when the metric is presented. Beginners sometimes imagine that data quality is a technical housekeeping issue, but it is really a management issue because leaders rely on these measurements to shape priorities, approve resources, and judge whether risk treatment is moving in the right direction. Reporting metrics is not the same as dumping numbers into a document or dashboard. Reporting means translating measurement into understanding for a specific audience. Senior leaders often need a concise explanation of what the metric shows, why it matters, whether the trend is improving or worsening, and whether any decision or support is needed. Operational managers may need more detailed breakdowns, ownership information, and insight into where process delays or control failures are appearing. The same metric can be reported differently depending on who is reading it, and that does not mean the truth is changing. It means the explanation is being shaped so that each audience can use it effectively. Strong reporting also avoids overwhelming people with every available measure at once. Too many numbers weaken attention and make it harder to distinguish important signals from background information. A report becomes more effective when it highlights the few metrics that truly matter for the decision at hand and explains them with enough narrative that the audience understands their practical significance. A mature security manager also uses metrics to support decisions and improvement rather than blame. This is an important mindset because organizations can easily turn metrics into instruments of fear, embarrassment, or political defense. When that happens, teams may begin to hide bad news, classify issues differently, or focus on making numbers look better rather than solving the underlying problem. That behavior damages the entire purpose of security measurement. The healthiest use of metrics is to reveal conditions honestly, make progress visible, and help leaders decide where to intervene, invest, or adjust expectations. Metrics should create learning, not just pressure. Of course, accountability still matters, and repeated failures should not be ignored, but the goal is to strengthen control performance and reduce risk, not to create a culture where reporting itself becomes unsafe. New learners should recognize that this is one of the leadership dimensions of the topic. Good metrics support transparency and better decisions. Bad use of metrics encourages distortion, silence, and shallow compliance that looks good on paper while leaving real weaknesses in place. Over time, effective evaluation and reporting of security metrics helps the organization move from reactive management toward more informed and deliberate management. Instead of waiting for major incidents or audit findings to reveal problems, leaders can watch meaningful signals and intervene earlier. Instead of relying on instinct or isolated anecdotes, they can compare trends, judge whether corrective actions are working, and ask sharper questions about resource use, control maturity, and unresolved exposure. This does not mean metrics eliminate judgment. In fact, they make judgment more important because someone still has to interpret the information carefully and decide what matters most. That is why the strongest security managers do not worship numbers and do not ignore them either. They use them as tools for seeing the environment more clearly, communicating with credibility, and guiding the organization toward better choices. Metrics become part of management maturity when they are selected thoughtfully, evaluated honestly, and reported in a way that supports action rather than mere observation. As we close, the main lesson is that evaluating and reporting information security metrics is really about turning measurement into management value. Useful metrics are relevant, reliable, understandable, and connected to the risks and objectives that matter most to the organization. They include both signs of past outcomes and signals of future concern, and they only become truly effective when they are interpreted with context and reported to the right audience in the right way. Numbers alone do not create insight, and polished dashboards do not guarantee understanding. What matters is whether the metrics help leaders see reality more clearly, decide more wisely, and improve the security program over time. For someone learning CISM concepts, this topic is a reminder that management depends on more than technical awareness. It depends on the disciplined use of information to reveal progress, expose weakness, support accountability, and guide decisions that make the organization safer, more resilient, and better prepared for the risks it faces.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.